Hi, I'm Dr. Danielle, and welcome to Conversations on the Couch. Today, we have a fantastic episode with Keshia Cameron, my dear friend. We'll be talking about something that I hear a lot about on social media, which is the imposter syndrome. So, we'll be defining it, talking about how it shows up for us, our own personal experiences with it, and the changes that we'd like to see in the community in order to improve our experiences with it, if not get rid of that imposter syndrome altogether. I hope you'll stick around and enjoy this wonderful episode. Welcome to Conversations on the Couch, everyone. Today we have a very special guest, my dear friend and colleague, Keshia Cameron. Keshia, please do us a favor and let us know who you are and all the good things that you want folks to know about you.
Oh, absolutely. So thank you, Dr. Danielle, for having me.
Of course.
Yes, my name is Keshia Cameron. I am a licensed social worker. I currently work as a program coordinator and social worker for the School of Social Work at Columbia University in high school, Frederick Douglass Academy 2 in Harlem. Besides my day job, in the evening, I work as a therapist, a part-time therapist at Love and Kindness Wellness Services, where I met my lovely friend, Dr. Danielle, where we collaborate on various projects like Black Women Speak, um, uh, therapy groups, etc. You name it. Uh, what else about me? I love to engage in art therapy. So currently, I'm doing diamond therapy, which
Hmm.
is diamond painting, which kind of ease the anxiety symptoms that sometimes my students as well as I have. And also, I am a licensed social work for financial social work. So basically, I could provide services in regards to budgeting, allocating resources, and just help clients debunk the money myths that they may have, including scarcity mindset.
Ooh, and that is so important. I love that. I love that.
Mhm.
Thank you for that. But how could you not mention that you are of Guyanese descent? Like, hello.
I
I'm Guyanese.
that's the most important. See the red hair? Yes.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I am glad you're here and I'm looking forward to our discussion because I know that it's going to be lively and interesting. So, everyone, please stick around and we'll discuss the imposter syndrome, what it means, how it shows up, especially in the Black community, and what we can do about it. All right, stick around, y'all. All right, Keisha, let's talk about the imposter syndrome and what it is. What is your definition of the imposter syndrome, and what are your thoughts about it?
Yeah, so how I define imposter syndrome is the person perceives an ability to see that their success is deserved or warranted. So they are in the higher risk of having anxiety because they always feel like their accomplishments. They don't feel like they deserve those accomplishments. They don't feel like they deserve praise and accolades for what they done, and they constantly, in a sense, belittle. And sometimes we kind of use the word humble um,
Mm,
ourselves in the lowest form because yes, I receive the praise, but I don't feel like I'm worthy of the praise.
right. Yeah. And I think, to add to that, right? It's a lack of feeling like you don't deserve it, right? Or if it does happen, it was like by accident or by some kind of
A
external
fluke,
force, right? What was that?
a fluke.
Yeah, fluke, right? Like this, I can't keep performing at this level because this is not authentically me, right? This happened by accident, or it was because, somebody else on the team really pulled in all the heavy lifting and I just happened to be there. So, really, like you said, belittling the contributions that you make, not seeing that your success is yours, but more so like the universe or God or somebody helped
Right,
you out, and that's the only reason that you could do the thing that you did. Yeah.
right. And I want to add something, because sometimes we tend to always praise others, but it's hard for us to receive and praise ourselves for what we have done. So it goes back into the worst thing.
Mhm.
And something that you said that was so powerful was regarding, when we get that success, we feel inauthentic. And
Mhm.
sometimes it's like we were authentic in receiving that success, but because we saw it as a fluke,
Mhm.
we tend to be like, okay, that is not something that I could constantly produce as a higher form. And therefore, I kind of suffer from, I kind of want to be the main character, but I'm comfortable being the backstage stagehand.
Mhm. So this is interesting, right? So this main character versus the villager B, right? Now, or the NPC, right? Now,
Mm-hmm.
when you think about it, um, you may not feel the person who has this imposter syndrome may feel uncomfortable or that they're not deserving or they could never be the main character, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there's also discomfort in being that villager B character as well, right? Because it doesn't feel like this is where I should be. But there's a thought process that's like, no, it actually is where you should be, right? So there's this like tension, this friction between wanting to be the main character, wanting to be your authentic self, and then thinking and feeling like you can't be that as well. And I think that that causes a lot of conflict, especially when I'm working with clients. That's what I see a lot, that tension and that conflict.
Yeah, and I think the same thing with me, with my clients as well, because sometimes they view themselves more as a helper of the success. And because we are so used to, or I'm not saying we collectively, but like some people are so used to being the helper
Mm-hmm.
that they struggle to say, okay, I'm ready to be the main character of my life.
Mm-hmm.
So when we get the successes, when we get the accomplishments, the accolades, it's very daunting, it's very overwhelming, because it's like, oh, okay, the spotlight now is on me. I don't know what I should do next. They stand on the stage and they froze and they're paralyzed, because
Right.
it's like there's an expectation for me to perform at this level. And to be honest, nobody told you to perform at this level. It's just more of you being authentic in the success that you achieve. So
Mm-hmm.
why do you feel like this was a mask or a fluke? That goes deeper into how you view yourself, how your confidence is, the spaces that oftentimes you carry your successes in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I want us to come back to that. So we'll put that on the table, and you got to remind me for us to circle back to that. The other thing that I want to add to this working definition of the imposter syndrome is this fear that other people are going to find out that you're a fraud, right? So one, there's this internal thought process that I'm a fraud. I don't have the skills necessary for this job. I don't have the knowledge. I don't know how to do things well, whatever it is in that thought process. And then there's this constant fear that someone else, your boss, your partner, your friends are going to find out that you've been faking it this whole time, right? And that you haven't known how to do this thing. And once they do find out that there's going to be this negative outcome or consequence where you lose your job, you lose your relationship, you lose your friendships, or whatever it is that you are holding on tightly to, and what you're afraid is going to be gone once the truth comes out, right? And that fear
Mm-hmm.
can be really debilitating, and
Yeah.
paralyzing, to your point. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that, because even as, they feel like they're a fraud, they actually are living their true self.
Mm-hmm.
So when you are confronted with saying, oh, well, I feel like a fluke, somebody could say, but who made you, or who made you feel like you was a fluke? And sometimes it goes right back to saying, oh, it was, honestly, it was me that said I felt like a fluke.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, how can we help clients, change that reality where their successes is well deserved, but they are achieving it in their true self.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's $1 million question, right? And one that I think is hard, particularly with the imposter syndrome, because even if people tell you that you're great, it's dismissed, right? Oh, they're just being nice, or for people that are in disenfranchised groups, oh, they have to say that because of their quota and their numbers. That I'm the only Black woman on the team, so of course they're going to try to keep me around so that for optics sake, right? The actual evidence of the work that they actually did and did well, it's, oh, that was just like a one-time thing, even though there's probably years and years of examples that support the idea that they can do this thing. So there's this dismissing of evidence and truth that would eradicate the imposter syndrome. So that, I think that's why it's really hard to work through that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So one of the things that you brought up was the concept of humility, right? And the role that it plays in the imposter syndrome. Now, I think that humility is great, right? As a Guyanese-born person, humility is really important, particularly I think in Caribbean culture. But imposter syndrome takes humility and distorts it and warps it into something that is not humility at all, right? Because this is like a cognitive distortion, this imposter syndrome, right? It's this warped thought that isn't actually based in logic, and it can be very irrational, right? One of the things that came to mind when you brought that up was the work of Dr. Joy DeGruy. And she wrote the book on the post-traumatic slave syndrome. I don't know if you've read it. Okay, let me be honest. I have not read the book, right? This is the thing. I start to read books, and then depending on like how heavy the topic is, I might need to take a break, right? So that's one of the books that I was like, oh, I really need to sit with this and really take this in. So the initial part of what she was talking about is that some of the things that happened in slavery have continued on throughout the generations and have shifted their form and shape. So thinking about humility, right, in the context of slavery, if you're an enslaved person, right, you do not want to brag about all your good qualities, right? You don't want to say, oh, I'm the strongest worker, or I can work from morning to night without breaks or needing to eat, and I can, you don't want to do that, because that brings attention to you, and the more attention that is on you, the more danger is associated with that, right? Yeah. So in part, right, there's this shifting, right? When an enslaved person might say, oh, Johnny is so lazy, right? He doesn't do anything. He can't read. He doesn't speak well. He's slow in thought, right? All of these things that kind of make you want Johnny to be able to stay with his family, right? And to not attract the attention of the slave owners, right?
Right.
And the oppressors, because again, there's a lot of danger that came with shining and excelling, right? Because you wanted to snuff that out as soon as possible, right? But post-slavery now, it's still happening, right? When there's like a humbling, right? You gotta, you hear people saying, oh, you gotta humble yourself, or you gotta, whenever someone is just excited about something that they've accomplished, right? And not being arrogant or obnoxious about it, but just like sharing their accomplishments is just like, oh, why are you bragging, right? So there is this element of the remnants of slavery and how it kind of impacts how we show up in the world today, particularly in people of color, Black people specifically. I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that.
Yeah, and I think, based on that person's spiritual background, it is said to be humble, because God has given you. It's like, for example, like the parables of talents. Like God has given you these talents, and you work so hard for these talents for it to showcase and be rewarded. But in the sense of being rewarded, we have to be like, okay, I was rewarded, but I'm not gonna show my reward because I'm your humble servant. So like, remember the last servant who took the talent and hid it. It was like, well, I knew how you were, and I was just operating on how you were as a master. So I hid this talent so that way you could get it back. But then the master is like, how dare you show me that this one talent that I give you didn't worth the amount of something. And I think that's the humbling. It's like a lot of people tend to just like, I don't want to show what I got because I don't know how it will make the other person feel. And I don't want to, cast a jealousy onto me because then that means I have to constantly perform. And if, something fails, that shows even louder. So a lot of people tend to want to humble, and I'm a victim of this. It's not that I don't want to showcase my talents. Is that sometimes I don't want people to feel awkward about me showcasing my talents. So I tend to humble it a little bit when sometimes it's like, girl, you did that. You earned it. And you should show it. And it's not in the arrogant form. It's just more so of like, let me show you what I have done in case you want the blueprint on how to do it yourself in that manner. So it goes again to how you explain the book. But one thing that came to my mind was like the black woman being strong, the strong type trope, and how they lean. It's tiring. It's like we lean into being so strong when sometimes we want to be hugged, we want to be vulnerable. So it's that trope of, okay, I'm working through everything and I'm taking care of everything, and I'm so happy I'm taking care of everything, and I'm so strong, I'm so strong, I'm so strong. But then I want to showcase it, but I want to be humble. Like, oh well, it's just I'm a black woman. I this is what I do. And sometimes it's like, yeah, this is what we do, but do we have to accept that? So humbling, I recently had talked to a client regarding her talents and how she showed up. And it goes really back into her confidence of herself, because now the spotlight is on her, and she feels like I cannot perform in the way that I did for this first project, even though she is performing the way she has done in the first project. It's her perception of herself that feels like, oh, I have to show up more and provide a little extra. And she doesn't know how to provide that extra because she wants to humble herself in the skills and not be so much in the spotlight.
You see how complicated that web is, right? Like the more you untangle, the more that you pull, the more that imposter syndrome like tangles it up even further, and then you're like confused and stuck and twisted in all kinds of directions. So I think that's a really great example, and of just like how it works, right, and what it can look like. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah. Thank you.
Let's talk a little bit about the strong Black woman stereotype or trope. So that brings me to my next question, which is, are there any cultural narratives or stereotypes that really increase one's self-doubt or lack of confidence, not competence, interesting slip there, and also feelings of inadequacy, do you think?
Yeah, one thing that came to my mind is the model minority. So how I know. I don't know, but
I swear,
sometimes
every time we do something, I gotta like always sit back. Where's she going? Where's she going?
where's she going with this? So, what I think about the model minority is, sometimes as we think about it, of those who are in Asian descent, they present well. They follow the rules. They follow the stereotypes of like doing the most and belittling their accomplishments.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes we as Caribbean people, we fall in that part too, because we, real controversial, we try to disassociate ourselves from, Black people of America.
And I think why do
And,
you wanna bring that beef into the? I never understood that beef, to be honest.
right,
But
right.
someone had to tell me that it was a beef because I didn't know that there was so much tension between the
I,
Caribbean folks and the African American folks. So
it is. There's a beef because sometimes, so from what I understand, the beef is that when we view Black Americans, we view them very negatively.
mm,
You know, they're, the stereotype of welfare queen, where they are, just accepting and receiving all these benefits without having to work. And, and that's the opposite of what we have stand on, is like hard work and perseverance will get you far. So
mm,
that's why we value so much of education in the Caribbean culture, especially you have to go into the 3 to 4, 5 fields in order to be viewed as, a pillar of society.
mhm,
And because we tend to like disassociate or not align with being Black, we often say, I'm of Caribbean descent
mhm,
versus being American descent Black, because how Blacks are viewed negatively, Caribbean, we are the model minority. We are falling behind the notion that education will get you far in life. So therefore, if I'm going to focus on being educated, then I'm going to be educated in specific fields, so that way I diminish what I'm working through personally. So for example, there's a doctor that wants to be an artist,
mm.
but their family been encouraged them to
Oh no,
do
no,
exactly. It's so annoying. Like
no.
for example, I could put myself in the room of
Mhm,
like my mom was like, "Oh, well, you're gonna become a nurse," and it's like, I don't want to stand up on my feet 12 hours a day, changing bed sores and all this stuff. I don't want to be that. But that is the ideal of being the model minority, where you are going to be educated to be something of a higher standard in life, and dismissing what you actually want to do. So how that plays in imposter syndrome is that because some model minorities feel like they have to sacrifice their personal accomplishments for professional accomplishments, there's a loss of identity of who they are,
mhm,
and they constantly are navigating on. I am successfully. I'm successful. Sorry, I'm successful in professional areas, but in the areas of my personal goals, I fall short.
mhm,
Or if I feel like I fall short because I don't feel like they are significant accomplishment compared to the professional goals that I show in society. So I'm going to boost it. I'm going to boost my professional, but I'm also going to be humble because I worked so hard to get
mhm.
to this point. And I'm so happy that I get to this point. But then that gap is like I'm missing my identity because I don't know if those professional accomplishments will even make me happy.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's a lot to unpack there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I mean, I think about, what you said and like this model minority concept, right? And I think that it brings me to questioning systems, right? And who constructs these narratives in the first place, right? Because it pits people, groups of people against each other, right? So the African Americans and the Caribbean folks are pitted against each other. And honestly, like I said, I didn't know that this was a thing. Um, I consider myself Afro Caribbean more so than American, even though I spent most of my life here because I was born in Guyana, right? And it is important to me to hold on to my Caribbean roots so that I don't forget my culture, right? But also, you know, uh, I've been here most of my life, so a lot of the Black American culture is a part of the culture that I have acculturated to and gotten
Yeah.
accustomed to, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, when I walk down the street, no one's going to say, oh, she's Guyanese. No, they're going to say
Right.
Black, right? And I think that I have really tried to not even engage in that cultural narrative
Right.
um,
Mm-hmm.
around between like who is the better Black, because I
Yeah.
think that's wasting energy and not addressing like the systems that have created this narrative and allowed this narrative to thrive and excel, right? Um,
Yeah.
because one thing that we don't talk about when we're talking about the imposter syndrome is the environment and the context in which the imposter syndrome can survive, right?
Yeah.
When it comes to like our culture as a whole, right? Why is it that this stereotype for the strong Black woman, why does that survive? Why is that
Mm-hmm.
so hard to get rid of, right? Um,
Right.
why is it that the model minority is something that's so hard to move on from? It's
Yeah.
because if we focused our attention on the systems and dismantling the systems, then that would be a problem. So let's just throw terms around like welfare queen, even though white Americans are the ones that are mostly on welfare, more so than Black Americans, right? So just
Right.
like you had to take the time to think about some of these things and why they exist and what function they serve, right? Um,
Yeah.
you want to?
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest, it's like we are living in a white patriarchal society that throws these terms in as a distraction because they always say that as a people, when we come together, we get a lot of things done and able to dismantle these systems. But we also play a part in these systems because we tend to alienate ourselves because we don't want to associate as being a negative form of society.
Mhm.
So we always have to, lean into that model minority because it's like I am not going to associate myself to the negative forms of what Black culture is. And it's like, what is the negative forms of Black culture?
Mhm.
Because there's negative forms of Caribbean culture, there's negative forms of culture in general.
Right.
All cultures around the world is not perfect and it has no perfect form.
Because
But we tend
yeah.
it's people, exactly. So if we focus more on the individual rather than just putting everyone in a group and categorize them as certain things, that's the distraction.
Mhm.
Because as you said, if I'm walking down the block, a person's just gonna be like, "Oh, that's a Black person." They're not gonna ask about my lineage. But then it's also what you have shared is that most of the time, like people, it's like, oh, you're Black, and they're like, no, 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 I'm Haitian American. We're quick to differentiate
I'll tell you
ourselves.
that Black is. I am Black. Where am I
Right,
from? Guyana, but I am Black.
right,
No, yeah.
right. You see how you answer, but some people tend to answer like, no, 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 I'm Haitian American, and it's like, okay, that is how you identify yourself, but color wise,
Mhm.
are you what? And it's like, okay, I'm Black, and it's like, okay, so
You're
at
Black.
the end of the day, you're Black. You're Black to be Black. Black, Black, Black on Black. So it's just so hard, and I think that's the cultural narrative. And that plays a part in the imposter syndrome a lot, because it's like, once again, I'm going to focus on the outwardly successes, but I'm going to humble it as much as I can, because I don't want to be arrogant into a society that I'm still seeking praise from.
Mm-hmm. Well, to that point, right? We just want to note that there's still this external force that's dictating how we should show up, right? And to drill it down a little bit further in terms of the strong Black woman piece, right? If you are not strong, if you cry, if you break down, if you seek help from other people, then I think you don't fall into that strong Black woman stereotype. And then it's just like, well, what's wrong with me? Right.
Right.
I'm not fitting in. I'm a fraud. I'm not this
Right.
Black woman because I feel all of these things. Right.
Right.
Just being aware that because of these narratives and definitions and stereotypes of how we should show up in the world, which are often not right? Like
Yeah.
not the aim or the goal to be this strong Black woman. I think it's great to be strong and also vulnerable, right?
Right.
But you
Right.
just want to be mindful of like what you lose by trying to live up to these external standards, right? So the doctor who wants to be an artist, right? Like that, you lose a part of that creativity when you, right? So I think you do have to be mindful that these cultural narratives can sometimes be detrimental to your the way that you show up, your authenticity, and
Your sense of self.
yeah, your sense of self, for sure.
Yeah. And and this is not only to Black women, but it's also the Black men stereotype too. And that's even deeper. And because I don't have experience in that, I could tell, like, from the cultural narrative of like, you're not supposed to cry, you're not supposed to show any form of emotion. You're supposed to be the strong Black man that is the pillar of society, that's the foundation, that's the rock, and able to power through all the challenges and the hurdles that is thrown against them. But at the same time, that identity sometimes shifts too, because it's like I'm forcing myself to suppress my feelings and not be true to myself, but lowering what I'm achieving or what I'm going through for this cultural narrative of being strong and being the rock. So that's like a whole deeper conversation, way deeper than what we are speaking about. But that plays a part in the imposter syndrome too. And I think if we, as you said, dismantle these systems that propel these cultural narratives, we'll be able to kind of lean towards our authentic selves. And I think that has been, something of a struggle, but also so recently a trend in gaining back a sense of self and identity that a lot of people are trying to engage in their journey of life, especially if you're going into those milestones, birthday of 25, 30, 35, 40, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right, that is a deeper conversation and definitely another episode to cover, or several episodes actually to cover that. Yeah. Okay. So let's get into microaggressions and biases, because I think that those are those little tiny cuts that, I have a problem with this term, to be honest, right? So we say it's micro, but those things that typically happen under the umbrella of microaggression are actually quite racist or just sexist, all the ists and isms. And there's not anything micro about them, but that's also another discussion. So we'll focus on microaggressions and biases and just how it impacts the self-esteem that someone might have and their self-confidence, and just like being in that environment, what the impact is, right? I know for me that when I experience microaggressions, it's very tiring because it's just like, here we go again. Okay.
Right.
Okay, you don't see me when I'm raising my hand, or you see me when I'm in the store and you're just going to walk behind me and follow me, right? So, um, I feel very tired, right? Because not only do I have to deal with the anger or hurt that's coming up from whatever microaggression or biasy that I'm
Mm-hmm.
dealing with, or bias that I'm dealing with, but I also had to deal with like my inner critic of like, oh, okay, um, maybe you're doing something wrong here. And, like make sure that you keep your hands in your pockets, right? This inner dialogue of like, okay, I don't know if you feel this too, but whenever I leave a store that has metal detectors, I feel super paranoid, right? I know I
Mm-hmm.
haven't stolen anything. I know that I paid for everything that I needed. But when I'm walking through it, I'm just like, oh my God, is it going to,
Mm-hmm.
are they going to think I've shoplifted something? Are they going to call the cops and get, right? So there's a whole inner dialogue that takes a lot of energy
Yeah.
when I'm experiencing a microaggression or a bias. And then I have to go through another part of this mental dialogue in it's okay. You haven't stolen anything. They're not going to find anything in your bag. You are not this person or this name that they've called you.
Mm-hmm.
It is okay for you to say no. You cannot touch my hair. No, you need to like back up, and all of these things. So for me, there's like a lot of like activity that's going on in my head, just trying to get myself regulated emotionally, physiologically, and also just saying, don't let this be something that you internalize as a you thing. This is not you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's how it impacts me. What about you? Do you have similar experiences?
Yeah, I mean, currently at my job, I don't have that experience because I'm in an environment of kind of belonging.
Hmm,
So
it's a good word.
that has been, yeah, so that has been very, that has worked well for me. But I would say, like, in the past jobs, I tend to do a lot of shrinking because I don't want to be seen as doing too much, you know? And how you was explaining it, I feel like that's like the shrinking portion of who I am. It's like I'm like tethering bits and parts of me to just be more instead of being so loud and flamboyant and I'm just being more mindful, professional, demure. And I think because I work in an environment that is not conducive
Mhm.
to who I am, I tend to have to shrink, but also overthink any interaction that I have.
Mm,
And then that plays a role in my imposter syndrome because it's like, okay, am I worthy enough to have this conversation? I don't want to sound dumb. I don't want to sound this way. Okay, if I present in this form of manner, would I get the same praise that I got from the last time? So it's a lot of like overthinking while shrinking
mm,
myself
yeah.
into a person that I quite frankly is uncomfortable of becoming.
Hmm.
And that is the sometimes a disconnect for me because it's hard for me to be in an environment that shrinks but makes you overthink. Because I could do the overthinking myself.
You're right.
I think I have
I can do
have
that all
the
by myself, right?
distinction. I could do the distinction of I could do that all by myself. But I don't want to have a work environment that adds on to the perceived sense of worth that is very diminished.
Hmm. Yeah.
So it is a struggle sometimes. Um, and that's why it's like you always have to affirm yourself of being who you are and being comfortable of who you are. And I had like, coworkers who present as themselves at this job that is very shrinking. And it's like, wow, how can I pivot? And when I became myself, unfortunately, I got fired. So it's like, what's the what's the
How the story was gonna go, Keisha. I gotta tell you, that's not how. Okay, all right, all right.
no? But it's true because that's another fear. It's like if I'm shrinking my authentic self, and then I'm starting to be more comfortable in who I am and advocating for what I want and what I need, and I'm starting to be more authentic. Sometimes you get that consequence of being authentic to being fired.
Mm-hmm. And what a
And
choice, right?
right?
Mm-hmm. What a choice between being your authentic self and like earning a living.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So it's like I can understand why a lot of people tend to shrink themselves and have this notion of being an imposter because they are presented as a fraud to a system once again that is very biased already against them.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm coming authentically, then why should I suffer the consequence of being authentic when I am professional and respectful in that manner?
Yeah. Right. So it's, you know, I think an important distinction here to make is that um, your authentic self is not accepted, right? And I think if you are being, still professional and still respectful to your colleagues and your employers and being your authentic self, then it's one thing to get fired because you're like turning up in at the job or whatever. But if your authentic self is someone who is more outgoing, right? And more friendly and whatever, but you're still within the boundaries of like the workplace, I think it's so unfortunate that you have to further shrink yourself down in order to fit into this very cookie cutter idea of what you're supposed to be, right? And I think I feel similarly, right? Even in the ways that
Yeah.
I show up. When we hit pause, the way that I show up after, I press play is very different, right? And even in just like the way that I present myself, I think it's often just in like this very, calm, whatever. And then when we're, on break, we're like, like just really it's like a very
Yeah.
different thing. And I think, sometimes you kind of put on that mask and that cloak, right? That you don't even realize when it's become so ingrained in your personality that you just like
Hmm.
switch on and off, right? So there's like a code
Code
switch,
switch.
right? Of not only just the language, but also the personas that you present in these different spaces. But I think in my case, even though it's still like a very more demure, kind of way of being, it still feels like my authenticity can shine through too. So finding the,
Right.
you know, that sweet spot, I think,
Finding a balance.
yeah, is hard. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's also the environment that you can find the balance in. Like for me, like I'm currently in my profession that I don't have to I could balance. Can I? Can I balance? Absolutely. But oftentimes we don't balance because there's a sense of belonging, sense of similar similarity of
Mhm,
the environment where it's comfortable in being who you truly are authentic. But at
mhm.
the same time, it's like, as you stated, like, when we pause, we tend to shift. And it's like, I don't shift. I don't really shift. I'm
Uh-huh.
really like who I am.
Yeah.
So I think like in that work environment that I had like really shown how code switching is very draining,
Mhm,
very tiring, and very hurtful to that person's sense of self and their identity.
mhm,
Because I'm working on this narrative of having to be smaller than small, when
mhm,
in my world I'm bigger than big.
mhm.
literally and figuratively.
A little on the code switching piece, right? For me, I
Hmm.
think it is protective, right? Because our authentic self haven't always been welcomed, right? History
Right.
shows, and it hasn't always been safe to be that way. So it's like a protective piece of like, I don't want to get hurt or harmed by showing my authentic self in this space that doesn't feel brave or doesn't feel safe. And I think
Hmm.
also because there are people out there that want to steal and claim ownership
Hmm.
over some of these things. I think that's
Hmm.
part of the code switching too, where it's just like you don't get access to this.
My true self.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because you're gonna
Yeah.
take it and you're gonna call it what were the sticky bangs or something, you know. I don't know if you know like
Oh,
it was edges, right? But it's like
I
some
do. Yes.
sticky bangs they call it. And it was just like,
Right.
okay.
Yeah. No, I totally get that because our true self is our is is very important to us, but it also like it's our cherished part of ourselves.
Mhm.
And we don't want people to have access to that cherished part of ourselves. And sometimes I equate our true self to our inner child because that's someone that we tend to always nourish and
Mhm.
protect and we love and we comfort them when they're sad and we praise them when
Sometimes
we
if we
sometimes
if we're doing the thing,
right.
sometimes.
Yes, sometimes. Or we praise them when they do a thing. So I understand that because you don't want to go into spaces where you truly show yourself and it becomes objective.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I do understand that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, look how adaptive it is, right? Like the code switching piece. And I definitely wish that we didn't have to be so adaptive or be so resilient because of our experiences, but so thankful that that is something that we can rely on at the very
Hmm.
least. Yeah. Thank you for watching today's episode. Please remember to like, share, subscribe, comment your thoughts on today's episode. We don't want the conversation to end here. So, again, discuss this topic with your family and see what conversations comes forth.